need to warn you before I get started with this movie review. This film is very graphic. This is late 90s, graphic. If you've ever seen movies like Mission to Mars, you've ever seen like Hellraiser or the Amityville Horror, this is gross, disturbing body horror, a lot of body horror. So just to warn you before you even get started, if you decide to watch this movie, be prepared for that. Hey y'all, welcome back. My name is Sarah and I love to talk about movies. In my movie reviews, they tend to be a little more in-depth than what you may be used to. Just dig a little deeper into what makes a movie so good, maybe not so good, and start a conversation here. With all that out of the way, today we're going to talk about one of my absolute favorite movies from the 90s, Event Horizon. Y'all know how, in particular with horror movies, there's a certain balance or sometimes imbalance when you're including something that may fall into multiple genres. And in horror specifically, I like for there to be a certain kind of balance. And to me, it's firmly 50% horror and 50% science fiction. So if you're looking for something that's more in the line of Hellraiser meets Lost in Space, The Matrix kind of meets Dark City, Event Horizon is set in the future. And in the future, humanity has mastered space flight. Traveling through space is something that's done on a regular basis, flights to different planets, etc., etc. And 7 years ago, there was an incident where what they call a ship or spaceship went missing. It was considered one of like the biggest catastrophes ever, and the ship that went missing was called the Event Horizon. So now 7 years later, a very small team, including a scientist named Dr. Weir, is tasked with traveling out into space near the point where the Event Horizon went missing and investigate a distress signal that was sent, because apparently they still send radio signals in the future, but that's a whole separate thing. The source of the distress call has been verified as the Event Horizon. When the movie starts, the main scientist, Dr. Weir, is already in space and he's traveling to meet the team that will travel to the beacon's point of origin. So he meets the team, everything is moving quick. They go into hypersleep and then they travel out. Everybody wakes up and is getting acclimated, and it's then that we're introduced to the team, which is, like I said, very small, but everybody has a very specific position. So Captain Miller is running the show. He's like, look, please explain to us why we're out here, because everything was kept very hush-hush. Because they never put a dollar amount to how much that ship costs, but I imagine it is in the ballpark of billions of dollars that just suddenly disappeared. So Dr. Weir, who apparently designed what he calls a gravity drive on the Event Horizon, which was designed to basically teleport the ship from point A to point B, only it never made it to point B, is attempting to explain the project and what happened up to the point where the ship went missing. So they find the Event Horizon and they climb aboard. They can't find the crew. You know, they've scanned the ship, they depressurize the ship and start searching level by level to see if they can find anyone. They're looking for footage from when the ship went missing. They're doing all of the things. When some of the crew starts to experience strange and inexplicable things, one of the crew disappears, and when he reappears is completely catatonic. As they're sort of turning the ship back on, I'll say, he starts having seizures and will not speak. So everybody's kind of freaked out. Then there's an explosion on the other ship that causes damage, and the crew has to move from their ship, the Lois and Clark, which I thought was cute, to the Event Horizon. They're running out of time already because the ship has been floating around in space for 7 years, and certain life-saving processes have gotten very low, like oxygen. They have to work very quickly to repair their ship in order to survive past 20 hours. So while they're on the event horizon, weird and disturbing and creepy things start happening. They start seeing things that aren't there and hearing things that aren't there, acting erratically. Each person is having their own experiences. So they complete the repairs, everybody's excited, yay, yay, yay. When the comatose comrade wakes up, puts himself into the airlock, and that's when things kind of go sideways. So in an attempt to take his own life, he opens the airlock. So they manage to get him back inside and to stabilize him, but that has become like the critical point where people are like, okay, what is happening? Everyone is pressuring Dr. Weir, like, what's going on here? You know, you built this thing, what happened? At this point, no one is accepting rational, practical explanations because too much weird has happened. They test the repairs that they were making on the ship. There's a slight leak, but it looks like something that they can fix without an issue. Everybody is getting more and more anxious to leave the ship when two members of the crew, Stark and Peters, find the missing footage from when the event horizon went missing. And it's horrifying footage that depicts the former crew committing heinous acts of self-mutilation and torture. It's not about retrieving what they can retrieve. They're just like, we gotta go, we gotta get out of here. And Captain Miller is like, oh, we're not just gonna leave. We're gonna blow the ship up and we're gonna book it out of here. And Dr. Weir apparently at this point sort of completely loses his mind and sabotages the other ship so they can't escape. Several of the crew go missing or die, and they decide that they're going to separate parts of the ship so that they can escape in one part and blow up the rest. Dr. Weir becomes possessed by whatever has possessed the ship, is doing everything he can to prevent the crew from leaving and taking them back to wherever the ship went before. So there's explosions. Some of the crew make it and some of them don't. They make it into the other part of the ship. There's this final crazy confrontation between Miller and Dr. Weir, and he manages to blow the ship up. The other part of the ship detaches and they manage to get away. And the rest of the crew manages to get away. Several months later, the team is found by a rescue team. There is a sort of open-ended ending where the rescue team is asking for a medic and no one appears, and then the doors close on their own, and that's how the movie ends. There are so many things I love about this movie. This is one of my favorite films because I feel like it's such a great example of horror and science fiction in equal amounts. Sometimes you get like 20% of one, 80% of the other. Here, there's just like a real nice blending of the two, number one. The second thing is the organization of this movie. It's a very straightforward film. That's why my overview wasn't very long, is because it's very simple. A crew is traveling out to investigate a distress beacon that came from a ship that was supposed to have disappeared 7 years prior. It's very simple. What's not simple are the individual experiences that each member of the crew has while they're on this ship, what they learn. Okay, we start with a creepy nightmare that Dr. Weir is having. Then he wakes up and he's going about his routine. And at first it looks like he may be in like a mental institution or something like that, because he's wearing like a standard uniform of some kind and the walls are kind of padded. And it isn't until you start to look around and he continues through his routine that includes him shaving that you realize, oh, this is just his room. And what I love is like at the end of that scene and into the next one, he appears to be upside down. And you're like, why are we looking at him upside down? And as the camera moves back, you can see that he's in space. And I love that. In line with that, I love how we just keep moving past things. We keep moving past things. In the beginning of the movie, they set up a very clear exposition. this is the year, this is this next year, this is what happened then. Man explores space, man lands on Mars, man builds this ship goes missing. It's very clear. Once Dr. Weir meets up with the crew, they don't even introduce themselves because they're already moving past that and into, okay, so we're on a deadline, we have to keep moving. We don't really have the luxury of setting up a conversation with everyone, introducing themselves and their jobs and all of that. We have to get moving as soon as possible. It moves from him showing up to all of them preparing to go into hypersleep. You get bits and pieces of people's personality right away. Once he wakes up and everybody comes out of hypersleep, then we get even more bits and pieces of people's personality. They move between each other, like physically through the space. Characters will make comments and the camera won't necessarily be focused on them delivering that line. You have this person having a conversation with that person, but the camera is far away to also catch a comment that this other person made. It felt very natural between members of the crew and awkward between Dr. Weir and everybody else because he is the odd man out. Even if they don't explain the science behind certain things so that you have an understanding, the events move in such a practiced way that it feels very authentic to the characters. Like Captain Miller is very much like, let's go, let's go, let's go. You have to do this. Why aren't you over here? You focus on this other thing, give me the results of this report, da-da-da-da-da-da. Very professional and very purposeful. Sometimes in science fiction movies, you got people hanging around for no reason, or their job is not really very necessary. And on a spaceship, everybody's job is necessary. Every person has a role. And in this film, they really make that clear. There's nobody there just to fill in the space. Like, they don't have security. What do they need security for? So I would give Event Horizon a 4 out of 5. I love the production design. It's very creative. For example, why would the inside of a spaceship have so many pointy things on it? So it definitely has the psychological thriller aspects, the creepy quietness of space. This ship is humongous, and you really get a sense of size as you watch the film, like corridor to corridor, the medical bay, the bridge, like how much space there is, how big the ship is, and how empty it is because there are no crew members. The design of the ship, and the design in particular of where the quantum drive is, the use of symmetry, and the way that they've managed to combine something that could be, if designed slightly differently, would look less terrifying. And you know what? That brings me to several iconic lines in this movie where Baby Bear, the crew member Baby Bear, where he talks about he was walking down the corridor to the drive and he's like, it looks like a meat grinder, and he's not wrong. Sometimes in science fiction movies, the characters do not recognize the weird design of the things that they're in or using or whatever. So that was funny. Also, the whole scene where Justin, aka Baby Bear, is in the airlock and he's pressed the button to open it and is getting ready to open, and Captain Miller is on his way to retrieve him. Let me tell you how many movies where if you about to be exposed to space, you're dead. There is no possibility of saving you. You are just out there. It's a lot. Okay, so that whole sequence was so unique and so well shot. I loved it. First of all, you in space, so you're not going to be able to like move the way you normally do. So seeing how he moves through space as he's trying to get to where he is, hearing him give the instructions as Justin is like freaking out in the airlock. At one point, Justin says, my eyes. And Captain Miller says, don't think about him, shut him. Which is not funny. That's practical advice, especially because he's like, look, you need to listen to me. You need to crouch into a ball. You need to blow all the air out of your lungs. I'm coming. I'm on my way. Then the door opens and he goes, for like a couple seconds, goes floating out into space, and then Miller is there and manages to push him back inside, and they get him inside. He looks messed up, but he survived that and is would recover from that. I haven't seen anything like it. I've seen in the movie Sunshine, for example, they try to wrap themselves in insulation from the inside of one of the space stations. That's the only scene that I can think of right now that is very similar, but it was so good because you're inside the airlock with Justin as like gravity goes and his body starts to react. He's covered his face with his hands like this and like blood is spraying. It's so good. It's so good. But like I said, it's very graphic. So if you can't handle it, skip it. But yeah, for creativity and the acting was very well done. I liked all of the characters. I thought they felt very authentic, and there was a lot of like diversity there, so they didn't all feel the same. So they don't all seem like the same character, just in different physical bodies. You know what I mean? Sometimes they have a tendency to make characters in the same situation, like part of a team or part of a group. They're just different versions of the same kind of character. In this case, they didn't go into it too much because the urgency of the situation did not allow for that. It was like, no, we got stuff to do because we're on a clock. We got to get out of here. You know, weird stuff is happening, so there's an extra added sense of urgency. But otherwise, you know, to me, there was no wasted time or space looking at something or ruminating on an idea. I also like the idea that instead of the ship being transported from one location to another location, it was transported into another reality. I thought that was so interesting, and that reality was sort of like the opposite of the current reality. Please let me know what you guys think. If you've seen the movie, what really stuck out to you. Thank you for spending your time here with me. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you all next time.